Brilliance Audio presents the unabridged recording of Right of Wrongs by Mica Stone, performed by Cassandra Campbell. Part 1. 1. Monday, 10 a.m. Linoleum worked better as an artist's palette than carpet or hardwood or tile. That discovery came after 3 trial runs. Practice had made perfect for his first human killing, and nobody near the old place really missed the yapping dogs. He couldn't imagine anyone missing the neighborhood either, if they were as lucky as the dogs to get out. Shithole of a place to grow up in, shithole of a place to raise kids. First time he'd tried painting, strands of the bedroom's braided throw rug had gotten caught in his bristles, creating dirty strokes instead of clean straight lines. The test message he'd painted with the miller's Chihuahua princess had been a clumpy disaster, full of dirt and dust and the hair he'd picked up when he'd pressed his brush into what little blood she'd given. She was his one and only Chihuahua. Size did matter. Another lesson he was slow to learn. Crevices between the bathroom's dirt-crusted tiles had swallowed the fluid before he'd finished his work the second time, and the Benson's pug, George Orwell, dried up too fast. The hallway's hardwood was just as thirsty, and the Hart's rat terrier Rambo had been too small for more than a few words when he had so much to say. Stupid of him not to remember the size thing. The neighbors had gone on high alert the day he'd figured out the flooring issue. A waste of their time since he was done with their pets. Unfortunately, few houses still use rolled linoleum. He should have thought of that before starting. But smart as he knew he was, he'd never been the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. He knew that, too. He'd been told so his whole life, and he'd heard all the jokes. Not playing with a full deck, one sandwich short of a picnic, dumber than a box of rocks. It would have been nice to have friends in his corner, but he was okay with who he was. And if it made people feel better about themselves to tease him, well, he had them all on his prayer list. Teasing was one thing. Dishonor was another. Disrespect, disobedience, discourtesy, disregard. Knowing this was the Lord's work made it easier to do what he had to. And if along the way he took a wrong step or sinned, forgiveness was his for the asking. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. He wasn't sure he could paint it all. Gina Gardner's house had Italian marble in the entryway. In the end, he'd used a tarp to catch her blood, not knowing what type of flooring he'd find. All he was going to need were 6 words of the verse. Her days weren't going to be long upon any land. Neither were the days of the others. The brush he'd chosen would make it easy. It hadn't been cheap, and he'd had to settle, but gray squirrel just wasn't in his price range. This one was flat, made of ox hair dyed to look like red sable, and was close to being 2 inches square. It was also designed specifically for lettering. Honor. He dipped the brush's tip in the pool of her blood next to her waist, where he wouldn't risk contamination by her tears or saliva, and stepped over her body to the foyer wall he'd cleared of her family photos. He was surprised she'd had children. 3 of them, even. They'd be better off this way, left to their father, though who knew what sort of fool had bred with her. She'd never shown anything resembling compassion. Honor thy. He dipped his brush again, noticing the gray roots at her temple. Her hair had grazed her waist when he'd known her, and was always hanging in her face. Hippie hair crowned with rings of flowers. It had smelled of flowers, too. So had her skin. Roses and magnolias and lilies. scents strong enough to make him sneeze. Wide-legged jeans and airy peasant blouses, and the Eagles on the 8-track singing One of These Nights. Patchouli had wafted on the air through her bedroom, and she'd hung posters of mustached rock stars baring their hairy chests from their throats to their navels. They'd promised with their eyes to show her the way to heaven. Honor thy father. He dipped his brush once more, thinking thy a strange word and too much like thigh. Hers were toned, her legs long, spread where she'd fallen. Tight knee-length shorts, once pink, now spotted red, clung to her skin, which was spotted too. Paint dripped from his brush, and he stood, taking in the edge of her socks and her pink leather shoes. Her sports bra was also pink, as were her nipples beneath. He'd looked out of curiosity, not lust. Nothing about her stirred him any more. He wondered how much she'd changed since she'd stripped in front of him. A joint, its tip glowing, caught between her lips, and asked him if he knew where heaven was. She hadn't even honored herself. He supposed he should have given her time to confess her sins before drawing the blade across her throat, but she'd made too many lives hell on earth for that sort of dispensation. Besides, he wasn't a priest. She was never good for anything but slutting, and she ruined everything for everyone. That was the part he had to remember. There was too much at stake to let things go wrong. He had to be careful. He had to do it right. Honor thy father and thy mother. There. The first sacrifice. Done. He'd played the part of executioner all on his own, and in the process, turned out to be a damn fine artist. Even if he was the only one who'd ever know. 2. Monday, 12:15 p.m. Decaf triple venti soy no foam latte. Add 2 sweet and low packets, and I'll take a blueberry muffin, all of it to go. Because, Miriam Rome mused, from her spot in line behind the customer placing the high-maintenance order, chemical sweetener and genetically modified milk replacement canceled out the muffin's refined sugar and saturated fat. She took a deep breath, inhaling the aroma of fresh brewed espresso, of creamy warm milk and breakfast pastries, cinnamon and sugar and sweet, sweet fruit. The indie jazz softly piped through the speakers should have soothed her, as should have the inviting club chairs and earth tones, the minimalist fixtures in brass. But she wasn't soothed. It was the last blueberry muffin, and that made it the muffin she was having for lunch. This was her day-off routine. Yoga, Starbucks, a book to take her away. She'd finished the first, had come for the second, and had her Kindle in her leather crossbody bag ready to complete the threesome. She gave Vikram, the barista, a look. Worried frown, worried pout, desperate, nearly pleading. He tightened the press of his lips and repeated to the woman in front of her, "Decaf triple venti soy no foam latte with 2 sweet and lows." Marking her cup with her order, he stepped from the register to the pastry case, picked up the muffin, then returned it to the shelf with a shake of his head. "How about a slice of banana nut bread, or a morning bun? Half the bottom's fallen off the muffin." The woman shook her head, her white blonde extensions catching in the ruffled collar of her blouse and showing off her mud-colored roots. "Just charge me half price, then." This time Vikram tossed the muffin beneath the counter. Miriam cringed, imagining coffee grounds and napkins damp with spilled cream, but trusting the barista with her life, or at least with her day off. "Best I can do is discount the latte." "Fine, I'll have a cheese Danish." "Good choice." He picked through the selection, settling on the largest, ooziest one, glistening with the most glaze.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?